So welcome so much to Tropical Fruit Tuesdays. We have a guest speaker, Mr. Mark Bailey. He's an expert in many things, including passion fruit, which is what we'll be talking about today. He and I are both members of IFAS. That's University of Florida. We have an extension building office in every county, all 67 counties. I'm in Miami-Dade, and Mark is in, I believe, Marion.
That's right, Marion County.
Okay, good. I could have blown that real well. This is Tropical Fruit Tuesday. We're talking about growing passion fruit. Next week on Tuesday, we're going to have a live class, hands-on propagation, where we're going to be doing grafting, air layering, cuttings, and seeds. It's an all-day class from 9 o'clock to 3. You get lunch. You can sign up on Eventbrite. So go to Eventbrite and look for my name or put in Tropical Fruit Propagation. And then on October 8th, another webinar for Tropical Fruit Tuesday, Tools of the Trade. So we'll be doing that, talking about tools, cleaning tools, sharpening tools, the right tool for the right job. So these are all the Tropical Fruit Tuesdays we've done so far. We're adding one today, and you can find all of these on YouTube, including the one today. Will be up by the end of the week. And I have a Tropical Fruit information page that has all this kind of information. You can find it on that QR code, or you can search Miami-Dade Extension Tropical Fruit, and you'll find it. Great info there, if I do say so myself. And our speaker is, if I can move all this stuff off my screen, he's a sustainable agriculture and food system agent in Marion County. He has degrees in entomology, plant protection, and pest management. He has more than 20 years of agriculture and horticultural experience, and yet he looks so young. And passion fruit is his passion. I'm pretty sure about that because I've seen him give plenty of really good talks about passion fruit. So Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to put myself on mute.
Appreciate the introduction. Let me make sure that everything is good to go. And let me know if you can see a purple passion fruit presentation. Did you see it pop up?
It's there. It hasn't opened all the way yet.
Okay. How's that?
Yes. Beautiful.
All right. Very good. Once again, thank you for the introduction. My name is Mark Bailey. I'm the ag agent for Marion County, and I'm really interested in passion fruit production. I've been basically studying this crop for many years now. And the way that I discovered passion fruit is I was out on the University of Florida campus in Gainesville, and there's this kind of wild area intended for study. And I came across some maypops, which are closely related to passion fruit, and they have a really peculiar flower. And I tried some of the fruit just out in the woods, and I wasn't even sure what it was before I tried it. And it was delicious. And so I really got interested in understanding more about the passion fruit kind of family. And let's get into how to grow passion fruit in Florida. Upper left-hand corner, you see the beautiful passion fruit flower, a truly unique flower among flowering plants. It's quite incredible. In the middle, you see the vining growth and the soon-to-be mature passion fruit. On the right-hand side, you have the passion fruit that are beginning to dimple a little bit once they fully ripen. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what passion fruit actually is. And passion fruit is basically, it is a short-lived perennial vine, and it produces what I would consider to be delicious, tropical-tasting fruit. I don't really know how to describe it. It's amazing. If you haven't had passion fruit before, you're in for a real treat, and I encourage everyone to try some. We're still kind of late in the season, so you might get lucky if you have some in the Miami-Dade area. They're mostly native to South America, so Brazil, northern Argentina, that kind of places. the vines grow extremely quickly. So we're talking like if you grow from a cutting, they will grow 30 feet in a single year if they're in good condition. Okay. So they'll be productive within 9 months, but expect realistically about a year before they come into full production. And they last about 3 to 4 years before they begin to kind of fall apart. So they're not going to live for 10, 20, 30 years like certain grapevines can, which are unrelated, but they'll live again about 3 to 4 years. So you need to have a plan once they hit about 3 years to cycle them out to replace them with new ones. So they belong to a family called Passifloraceae, which has about 550 different species, and about 10 of which produce what I consider to be high quality edible fruit. What we're talking about today is the Passiflora edulis. It also contains the variety called Passiflora edulis flavicarpa, which is a yellow passion fruit. So you typically have purple passion fruit, and you have yellow passion fruit, and you have a range of colors in between. And I should also note that passion fruit should not be confused with passion flower. Passion flower is the native here to the United States, and that's Passiflora incarnata. That's the native maypop. They both produce similar looking flowers, but the fruit is going to be kind of a yellowy green color once it's ripe. They both taste quite good, but passion fruit by far has superior quality fruit. Okay. All right, and as a just to let y'all know, University of Florida has a huge amount of publications we put out each year, and these are intended for accessibility to the public. And I wrote a publication along with my co-authors. It's called The Passion Fruit in Florida. And if you type in the passion fruit in Florida or passion fruit then eatus or ask IFAS, that article should be the first one that pops up. A lot of details contained in there if you want to read more about their origins and about production methods for agriculture. Let's get into a little bit about the anatomy. These have all kinds of different kind of shaped leaves. Once they're mature, they will typically have uniformly shaped leaves. This is called leaf heteroblasty, a fun term. And basically, if they're really young leaves, they change their shape as they mature. So the mature leaf will have 3 deep lobes, and they'll be serrated. They're not sharp, they're just serrated. And they also will produce at the node of each leaf, you're going to have a tendril. A tendril is kind of like, basically, it'll whip around anything it can find and hold on to it. And once it dries out, it is as tough as metal wire. I mean, good luck trying to get it off. It takes a lot of effort to get the tendrils off things. At the base of every single leaf is going to be what's called an extra floral nectary, and that produces a little bit of nectar at the base of each leaf. So if you do see a few ants, very few, intermittently climbing up the vine, is not hurting the plant. It's also not really causing any problems. And all of this is the tendrils and the long vines. These all can result in tremendous growth up trees. So if you want to grow it in its kind of native growth habit, it's going to be climbing to the tops of trees. If you're familiar with a plant called kudzu, that's how fast and how large it'll grow. So in about 2 years, it can go about 100 feet up a tree, and then it'll hang down, and you don't need to worry about harvesting the fruit from 100 feet up because the fruit will drop off once they're ready, and the fruit are very durable. A little bit about the anatomy. In the middle is the ovary. The ovary is ultimately where the fruit is going to come from. It's going to swell from about the size of a jelly bean to the size of about a racquetball. And it's pollinated from pollinating that it comes from the anther. And then the pollen from the anther will then come in contact with the stigma and then travel into the ovary. Once the ovary is pollinated, or rather fertilized, the rest of the flower is going to disintegrate within a matter of days. So once it's mature, passion fruit will typically be either kind of a purple or a yellow or maybe even an orange kind of a color. And in my opinion, the purple is quite attractive. They all are. But when you cut it open, it looks kind of strange. For some people who are not familiar with passion fruit, it looks almost like caviar or maybe fish eggs. Doesn't taste like it, I promise you that much. But those are called arils. Those are juice-filled sacs, and inside of each sac is a seed. And so if you want to get free seeds from passion fruit, all passion fruit are going to have seeds in them. And so that's additional bonus. Anytime you go and buy some passion fruit, you got some free seeds that come along with them. So if you're interested in propagation, these are fortunately a very easy plant to propagate, typically simply through cuttings. What you're going to need is some clean tools, ideally cleaned with alcohol, so you're not spreading viruses or diseases from one plant to the next. You need to select vines that are very, very clean. So if they have any symptoms of diseases on the leaves, or they're withering or wrinkled leaves, stay away from those. So when you do find a healthy vine, you want to get about an 8-inch segment, maybe a little bit less than that, but you need to make sure they have at least one node, which is going to contain the leaves. So after you have your cutting, you're going to get some just generic potting soil and then plant it about a little over 3 inches deep. But at the base of the plant, where you plant it, it needs to have another node. It isn't required, but it does help more root growth. If you do have what's called rooting hormone, you can dip the cutting into the rooting hormone and then plant it, and that will encourage more root growth. You know your plant has roots coming out. Well, one, you can check it, but I don't advise that every few days. But when you see new growth begin to emerge from the cutting, new leaves are coming out, then you generally have an idea that they produce roots underground. Give it about another month after it's produced the roots, then you can transplant it either into a larger pot, or I'd say I like a 1-gallon pot typically, and let it grow for a couple of months to get fully established. But you want to keep it in partial shade or reduced sunlight, not shade, but just reduced sunlight so it doesn't dry out. The main enemy of cuttings is drying out. Also, you might be asking, why can't we produce them from seeds? Well, seeds don't always produce basically plants that are true to their parents. They might have genetics from prior generations that's coming out, and they may not all look the same. So sometimes you're going to have purple passion fruit and yellow passion fruit from the same parent plants. So once it's mature, after about 9 months to a year old, it produces growth. The new tips are going to have the flowers. Okay, so only will you have flowers at the tips of new growth. All right, so it's a very kind of important point there. And you can see them very, very small beginning to emerge. They do not flower all at once. They will flower over a long period of time, typically from May, June, and sorry, before that, April, May, and June is typically we're going to see most of your flowers occurring, and then fruit will be ready for harvest usually around June or July. Here's a quick picture of a native carpenter bee, and you can see the pollen all over the hairs beginning to pollinate that flower. So I think it's a pretty cool image, and it shows how in nature how this naturally occurs, the pollination process. So once the flower has been pollinated, you can see in the kind of upper left-hand corner of the screen, the ovary beginning to swell quite rapidly and the flower residue just falling off. And then it's going to turn kind of a yellow, green, and then eventually a purple, or if it is a yellow variety, it'll turn a darker yellow kind of a color, but usually it'll darken a few weeks before it's ready for harvest. You don't pick them off the plant, you let them drop off. So here's some additional immature fruit in development, and a single vine on average, if it's healthy and taken care of, will produce about 200 passion fruit per plant. Out in our field up in Citra, we have about 250 average per plant. So as a quick point, that when it begins to wrinkle, it doesn't mean that it's lower quality. It simply means that a little bit of water has left the rind, but the fruit quality inside is even better. The concentration of sugar is a little bit higher. So if you see some slightly wrinkled fruit, don't shy away from that. They're still in good shape. So for this area of Florida, typically production or harvest ranges from June through August. But in South Florida, you might see harvest as soon as May. And in some cases, you're going to have intermittent harvest throughout the year. I've seen it even in December as well. So south of Orlando, kind of all bets are off when harvest time exactly is going to be. But in most cases, we expect June, July for peak harvest to begin. So once again, the fruit are not usually picked off of the plant or cut off the plant, but they in fact will drop off. As soon as they're ready and mature, they're going to drop off the plant, and they can stay on the ground for several days without being harvested. Once you do pick them off the ground, all you need to do is wash them off. They're one of the few fruit that are legally allowed to be picked up off the ground and washed off because they have a very waxy and thick shell, essentially, or cuticle to the fruit, and they're really well protected. If you want them to last a little bit longer, don't pull the stem out. Just leave it there. It acts almost like a plug, because if you pull the stem out, it actually opens up a hole into the middle of the fruit. As a quick point for storage and handling, they're usually going to stay in shelf-stable condition for about 30-35 days if you keep them in a humid environment. So you can even bag them. The simple plastic bag will do a pretty good job of preventing humidity from leaving the fruit. And if they stay at about 45 to 47 degrees and about 85% humidity, they will typically stay in really good condition for a very long time. If you haven't handled passion fruit, then you may not know that they're actually very, very durable. And that's why they can drop off a 100-foot tree and hit the ground, and they'll only have minimal damage to just the superficial damage to the fruit, but the fruit quality inside will be perfectly fine. You can't do that with a peach, but you certainly can do that with passion fruit. They're a very, very tough plant. All right, so this is an example of the kind of different, the subtly different shades of color that the purple possum variety, that's probably the most planted variety in Florida, is called purple possum. And you can see the different kinds of shades of purple, quite an attractive fruit, in my opinion. And they're about the size of a racquetball, typically. So it fits nicely in the palm of your hand. They're going to weigh a little bit, I'd say about an ounce or so per fruit. And so, as you should also note, that when you're trying to get juice out of passion fruit, it is a bit of a task, because you're going to use probably like a grapefruit spoon or to kind of scrape out all the pulp. But you're not really going to be using passion fruit exclusively just for juice production, because passion fruit is best when you use it for flavoring of different kinds of foods. Okay. So there's a lot of things you can use passion fruit for, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I should also mention that if you have any interest in the production and sale of passion fruit, I think now is a really big opportunity for those who want to set aside a quarter of an acre or even a full acre of passion fruit. And we'll get into kind of the economics just very briefly on a slide or two. But I think it's a tremendous opportunity for potential growers. But something you can use for marketing is they're very nutritious. They have really high vitamin C, and they also have what are called carotenoids. Carotenoids are anything you see in usually bright orange or yellow fruit or vegetables, and those are really important antioxidants. So hopefully y'all know a little bit about antioxidants and how they prevent basically cell damage throughout our bodies. They kind of reduce the rate of aging that occurs. And passion fruit does have fairly high carotenoid content as well. So high vitamin C, high carotenoid content, also vitamin A. And so those have health benefits that could be used for marketing, or it's used for your own personal consumption. I mean, I eat passion fruit on a pretty regular basis, and so I guess Mr. Jeff said that I look a bit young. That's actually an older picture. I'm a bit older than that. About 3 years ago, that picture was taken. But if you haven't had passion fruit before, I think it's a really floral, tropical kind of flavor. It's a very strong flavor. I want to warn you about that. That a single tablespoon is almost overwhelmingly. It's such a rich, powerful, floral, fragrant kind of a experience is what I would call it. But usually these are used for flavoring of beverage and dishes. There's plenty of options for like passion fruit kombucha. There was a passion fruit beer made seasonally up in the Tampa area. And of course, you can use these for jams, jellies, and even ice cream. We had a chef in Ocala, which is in Marion County, and he had a passion fruit day, and he had like passion fruit glazes for his different dishes. And he also made passion fruit ice cream. And I got like a tub of passion fruit vanilla ice cream, and it was phenomenally good. It was one of the best ice creams I've ever had. So huge amount of options for passion fruit. And also, you don't just have to add them into other dishes, but you can eat it raw. I mean, I love eating passion fruit raw. I can only handle about 2 or 3 fruit at a time. It's so powerful. But in every single scoop, you're going to have some of those seeds. So some people ask, like, are these seeds like a blackberry that might get stuck in your teeth or anything like that? Not at all, at least not in my experience. If you ever eaten M&Ms, the passion fruit seeds will crunch just like an M&M. So like 2 bites and it just kind of dissolves in your mouth and a really pleasant kind of aftertaste. Also, I should mention that the leaves can be dried and used for a tea. It tastes pretty good, but in Brazil, we have a native Brazilian in our office. In Brazil, they use the tea, the leaves, the passion fruit leaves, for tea, and it has a mild sedative effect. Okay, very mild. We're not talking about anything serious. Very mild sedative effect after a few cups. Apparently has. I haven't experienced that myself. It's on my to-do list. But it is a very flavorful drink if you do have it as a beverage. Also, the fruit rind can be dried out and turned into a flour or flour additive as well. So this is what it looks like when it's been processed. These are the halves. We cut it in half and you scoop the fruit out. And it looks like little bowls, essentially, granadilla is like a little bowl, essentially is what it is. And they scoop out nice and evenly. These also, I forgot to mention, one of my favorite combinations is yogurt and passion fruit is absolutely fantastic. You can't go wrong with the combination of those two. I like kind of a sweet and a sour sort of a combination. This is a juicer that we have, and I should warn you that the passion fruit seeds can clog up some juicers, so be kind of careful. But this is about, I think it's about 30 or so passion fruit that we processed, and each of those bottles is about half a liter. So combined, about 30 fruit will produce maybe, I'd say maybe about half a liter or so for about 30 fruit. But the point is that you wouldn't want to drink that unless you're really ready for it, because a single sip is going to like just overwhelm you with a burst of flavor. So, I mean, if you're ready for it, go for it. But I think it's absolutely, I drink it out of a shot glass. It's so potent, but great for adding to other kinds of juices like pineapple juice or orange juice is fantastic. So let's get a little bit into the planting and irrigation. So we have this can be applied in your backyard, or this can be applied in a commercial kind of a setting, but I'll try to tailor it mostly towards backyard kind of production. Throughout Florida, we don't have the best soils. Okay, like for example, in the Homestead area, you don't really have soil. It's more like gravel, rocky, sandy soil. So what you can do is you can dig out, or you used to use a pickaxe to dig out a shallow hole, and you can backfill that with mature old compost, or you can bring in your own high quality compost or soil kind of material, and you can plant that into that. So usually around 1.5 feet by about 1 foot deep, kind of like a shallow bowl, does a pretty good job. And you can set up a drip irrigation. You don't want to over irrigate pasture, just enough to wet all the roots, and that's about it. And you certainly don't need to use irrigation. Don't turn that on whenever you have regular rain. We've had rain for the past like 15 days here, and we definitely don't need an irrigation for our passion fruit. All right, so when it comes to planting, anytime there is the chance of frost is not a good time to plant passion fruit. So my recommendation is wait pretty much after March. After like mid-March, you should be perfectly fine just about anywhere in Florida. Maybe the Panhandle, we might still get a frost still in March, but nonetheless, I'd recommend that time. They like a soil that is slightly acidic, which means pH of around 5.5 to 6.5. If you're not sure about what your soil pH is, if you want to grow in a native soil, you can get a soil test. Jeff might be able to help you out with kind of tailored information about the soils in your area. You definitely want to plant them in full sun or under an area that's called high tunnel. High tunnel is basically like a protected kind of like dome or protected, almost like a big tent, essentially. And these can handle modest shade. So if you have them about 20, maybe 25% shade, they'll still grow quite well. And in some cases, we've even seen less diseases when they're growing up, either trees or in slightly shaded kind of growing situations. Also, you want to make sure, this is a really important point, and I have it bolded. You want to make sure they're planted into well-drained soil. Anytime you have wet, waterlogged, or soggy soil, I can pretty much guarantee they're going to get soil-borne diseases and your plant's going to wither. So well-drained soil is a really is your only option. If you don't have well-drained soil, I know some areas of South Florida are kind of muck soils, then you can grow them in containers. So you can grow a passion fruit successfully in about a 10-gallon container should be sufficient to grow mature vines. Again, they're going to die off in 3 or 4 years anyways, so it's perfectly fine to grow them in containers. It's just a bit more expensive to do so. So if you got 3 or 4 plants on your back of your patio, that's going to be a fantastic option for container planting. If you are planting them in rows in a kind of larger setting, then plant spacing of about 10 feet is a good idea. Keep in mind, these vines are going to grow about 30 feet per year. So just be aware of where they're going to be growing onto. If you don't want them to grow onto your neighbor's tree or over a fence, just be aware of that, and provided the trellising space or location that's suitable. If you are planning on, like, say, an agricultural setting, you can plant between 200 to 400 plants per acre. It depends on the spacing and other factors. I just want to kind of mention that if you're interested in commercial production. So when it comes to trellising, again, this is more of a commercial kind of production, but you want to give them a lot of space. We only plant them on one single trellising wire, and the reason for that is because we want them to grow basically long and thin, as opposed to getting thatched. If they grow too densely together, then you're not going to have good airflow, and water and moisture to stay stuck on the leaves all day long, and then you're going to basically get diseases. There's a lot of trellising designs out there. We don't have time to get into all of them, but a single trellising wire. So if you have like a single post, like a T-post here and a T-post 10 feet away, and you anchor it down, and you put a single trellising wire, that should be good for one plant. So again, just be aware of how rapidly they grow. And also, you don't want to be pruning them on a regular basis, because as a reminder, the fruit and flowers only occur on the tips of new growth. So if you're constantly pruning to keep it back, you in fact may never see any of the flowers and fruit come out. This is what it looks like on a single trellising wire. It gives you an example how rapidly and how thick that they grow together. And at the end of the year, you're going to cut them back, and they're going to look basically just like I'll show you a picture in a second. Basically, just strip back all the way to the single trellising wire. 99% of this is going to be stripped away. You're going to leave a single trunk, the main leader, leave that intact, and then it'll grow back just like this within about 60 days. So when it comes to planting and fertilization, the younger plants will need smaller quantities, of course. And you want to give them, there's a lot of formulations out there, but like an 8-3-8, I mean, heck, you can do 10-10-10 is perfectly fine too. Just in modest quantities, every 4 to 6 weeks should be okay. And then you increase your rate as the vine gets more and more mature, especially when they're flowering is a good time to be, or actually before that, to be fertilizing them. But I also have a really quick note. You want to make sure that you do not fertilize with too much nitrogen. I recommend a lower number. The first number in, say, 10-10-10 is going to be N for nitrogen, then P for phosphorus, then K for potassium. So N, P, K for those 3 numbers. Get a modestly low first number and a slightly higher third number. And if you give it too much nitrogen, it'll have lots of growth and no flowers and no fruit. Promise you, I've seen this happen on plenty of occasions. So this right here is from the publication I mentioned in the second or so slide. And it talks about the rate of NPK per ounce per vine for the younger plants. It increases from 4 initially all the way up to 16 every 6 or so weeks. So it's based upon the age of the plant. So when it comes to pruning, really be aggressive with pruning. Leave the central main vine intact, but cut off everything else. And I recommend you either burn it or get rid of it or compost it rapidly, because you don't want to have any diseases accumulating from year to year. Just get it off site and it should be okay. If you do see, during the pruning process, if you do see any symptoms of viruses, which often have wrinkled leaves or dying leaves, especially on the tips, or the tips having a fungal growth, really aggressively cut it back and check the new growth. If the new growth is not healthy, then yank out the entire plant. We don't have time to get into all the things about pest control, but fortunately, there's not a huge amount of insects that will cause major damage to passion fruit, with the exception of something called a Gulf fritillary. You can use an organic spray called a BT spray. and that is an organic spray that only affects chewing insects and won't affect other kinds of basically insects like honeybees and whatnot. So the name of the game is to prevent as much as possible. So you want to be pruning out infected plants, and also you want to apply, if you do apply a fungicide, provide it preventively. So things like copper sulfate, things like that are going to be very effective at preventing diseases on the leaves. So most diseases occur typically on the tips of new growth because the leaves are very tender, and that's where you might see diseases occur in those kind of situations. Weeds are not a major problem, and if nematodes are a problem, just use container planting is the best option. Considering grafting onto the native maypop, we actually have those in trial currently, and maybe in a year or two we'll have an update for that. You can see some of the copper that was sprayed onto the leaves. That residue will stay there if it's protected, and it prevents fungal diseases from occurring. So viruses is the #1 concern, often spread by aphids. If you see any wrinkled leaves or vine dieback, yank out the entire plant and replace it. Do not have a lot of investment in every single vine. Be ready to replace passion fruit again every couple of years. No big deal. So if you are outside the Miami-Dade area, cold is a concern. But basically, I'll give you a really quick summary. Protect the base of the vine. All the vegetation is going to die whenever it frosts, pretty much no matter what. But if you protect the base of the vine with a couple of handfuls of straw or anything, literally anything protecting it is going to be perfectly fine on the coldest nights. It will rapidly grow back from that that location. So I'm going to go just for about a minute into information about how to sell passion fruit and its value. So as an incentive, for those who do have even a quarter of an acre of land, you're interested in selling passion fruit, they go for the farmers markets and grocery stores. It goes for, at least it used to, goes for about $1.50 wholesale. So that'd be pretty good. If you can sell passion for $1.50 per fruit wholesale, usually the stores, they're going to go for about $2.50, maybe even $3. I know at Whole Foods, they're selling passion fruit for $4 per fruit. So if you can sell to people for, say, $2 a fruit, that's gonna be pretty good. It has a pretty stable market. I've been looking at the market trends for a couple of years now, and again, the wholesale market ranges from $1 to about $2.50 wholesale. What's interesting is that we recently collected some yield data, and on 1/8 of an acre, which is about 40 plants, we harvested our 10,000th fruit on 1/8 of 1 acre. Okay, so if you have even a quarter acre, that's gonna be pretty good. So if you can sell them for even a $1.25 or even $1.50 direct to customers, and you're getting 10,000 fruit for 1/8 of an acre, that's decent spending money right there, in my opinion. It'll definitely pay off the cost, at least at the rate of production we have. It will pay off the cost of production fairly quickly. Again, there is no investment that is risk-free. Otherwise, everyone would be doing that. Here's a quick slide on just the price, the market, what it's looking like over the past couple of years, price stability. And really quick revenue streams. In Florida, you can sell direct to customers up to about $500,000. So if you're anywhere near that, give an agent a call and we'll be able to help you out. But you can sell direct to customers. You can ship to all the lower 48 states. And if you are growing on larger quantities, you can sell wholesale. And if you want to get to like enormous, let's say you have like 5 acres or more passion fruit, then you can get into international wholesale or domestic wholesale. But also, if you are having trouble selling your fruit, you can freeze the juice for later use. Okay, and you can sell the juice directly to as an ingredient. Now you can't sell the juice directly to customers; that's a whole regulated product. But you can sell it as an ingredient to be included in other products such as candies, ice creams, juices, etc. Because usually they're brewed or they're sterilized during that process. All right, so quick summary, market space exists for growers at any size. And so basically there is a lot of options out there for y'all. Okay, so quick summary, I did a sensory evaluation for passion fruit, and I don't have time to get into all the details, but people like passion fruit. About 94% of people rated passion fruit as like it a lot or like it extremely. And so you have an example of a passion fruit juice product, a passion fruit purple possum on the left-hand side, and you have a ruby, kind of a yellow variety on the right-hand side. And basically, people like all the products at different degrees. If you are interested in commercial production, give myself or Jeff a call, and we can certainly help you out, especially for commercial production. So in summary, passion fruit is a new and exciting kind of a crop. It's been growing in South Florida for quite some time, but as people become more familiar with it, you can grow it as far as the Panhandle. We've seen, not getting commercial production quite yet, but I have done a quick study over, it's basically the threshold where passion fruit may actually die from frost, and they will survive about 95% down to 19 degrees Fahrenheit. So they're pretty cold tolerant. If you do any protective methods, it'll be great. They're really rapidly maturing, so it's not like an olive tree you're waiting 20, 25 years before they're mature. So they're rapidly maturing, and they'll be ready to go within 9 months to a year. It's a very high value crop, and there's a lot of things you can do with passion fruit as either a fresh fruit or a value added product. The downsides are that there's not really a widely established market yet. Most people who are familiar with passion fruit are from Florida. Outside of Florida, not a lot of people are familiar with passion fruit. It can be cold sensitive if you're living in an area, outside of Central or South Florida. There are fairly high costs to establish. For about a full acre, we're talking closer between $15,000 to $20,000 for a full acre to get established. But if you make your sales within the first year, you might be able to see your investment cost be made back within the first year. We have seen that in some instances. Results may vary. There are some disease problems, especially in South Florida. Viruses are the most significant problem. And we don't have any absolute established standards yet. We have some really good ideas, but we can't tell you precisely how much nitrogen to add or precisely how much potassium add. All we know is it's about a handful every 6 weeks presently. All right, so does anyone have any questions? It's about nearly 2:40 at this point. If anyone has any questions, feel free to write it in the chat box. But also, I do have a quick survey, and if you can use your smartphone, it's entirely anonymous. Nothing's collected. Only I get to see it. But if you don't mind filling the survey, this greatly helps us to do a better job for future kinds of programs. Tell us kind of what kind of programs you're interested in. And also, did you learn something today? Do you intend on implementing it? Those would all be more than welcome. So that's all I have for a quick summary of passion fruit production. If you want to, we do have an annual passion fruit production meeting in Citra, Florida, and that is about a 7-hour program. And when I say we summarized it, we really did. There's so much to go over, but these are the fundamentals. And if Jeff doesn't mind reading off the questions, I'd be happy to answer them as best I can, because I can't see the chat box for some reason.
Okay, here we go. So first one comes from Nancy, and Joseph can't answer this, but she had a question: where to buy plants in Marion County?
Okay, where do I buy plants in Marion County? So there is a gentleman, the only one I know of definitively, who sells them pretty regularly, is Scrubland Farms. He's a nursery at the Ocala downtown market. And he also sells them at his nursery up in Orange Springs. So they're really not hard to find online. You can buy them online. I bought my first passion fruit online. They go for roughly $15 to $20, not including shipping and handling. Some Home Depot, Lowe's, other garden stores, check your local nurseries and ask, hey, ask your local nurseries, do you sell passion fruit? And anywhere in the Orlando, Tampa, and South nurseries, they might have them in stock. I actually work with a propagator out of Tampa, and he sells about 45,000 passion fruit plants in 1-gallon pots per year. It even sells to a lot of nurseries. So you can buy them online, or you can check out your local nurseries.
Very nice. Juliet asked, do iguanas eat the plants?
Unfortunately, iguanas will eat just about anything with soft leaves. So I know they like bougainvillea. When I lived down in the South Florida area, I was a landscaper there for a couple of years, and I know that iguanas will eat a lot of things. As the leaves mature, they're probably less palatable because they're really waxy, and they're not very soft leaves. So I think that as they mature, they'll be less palatable to iguanas. And believe it or not, I found an iguana in Marion County near Ocala.
Hmm.
It was a certified sighting.
Ate its way up.
Yep.
Tammy asked, will the vines fruit on the ground?
Will they fruit on the ground? They probably will, but passion fruit is really happiest climbing. They really want to have their natural habitat is getting up and off the ground. So I'd recommend giving them some kind of a trellis. But yes, they should produce flowers and fruit on the ground in most conditions.
Okay, Veronica asks, says, I have one plant with no fruit. Do I need two plants to get fruit?
You really don't have to, especially the purple possum. I'm not sure what variety you have, but that's the most commonly sold one. But they're often self-fertile. But if you're not seeing any fruit, my two concerns are going to be basically they might have a disease. If you don't see any symptoms of a disease, then it might be potentially not enough potassium. Potassium is very important. That's the third number in the 10-10-10 or 8-8-8 fertilizer formulation. Get something that has modest nitrogen and is a little bit heavier on the potassium.
Thanks. Carl wants to know the annual pounds per acre for NPK for the BMPs.
We do not have that established yet. That's why when I was talking about the cons, we don't have an established. Great question. And I asked our team exactly how much they're applying, and we're collecting that data currently. What I would suggest you do is check out the EDIS publication that I linked at the very beginning. We're going to update that probably the end of this year or early next year. And then we're going to have the updates on the more precise information on the formulation and the quantity, and then we can do the math on how much we're applying per acre for BMP purposes. Great question. Definitely let me know if you want some really detailed information on that in a couple of months. But I actually asked our team, we don't know quite yet.
And Muriel has two questions. Is there a video for pruning? And can you elaborate on the use of rind of the passion fruit?
All right, so we don't have a video on pruning yet. That is on my to-do list. Great question. It's pruned very similarly to, not quite to grapes, but basically you have your central leader coming up, and where that leader connects to the wire, cut everything else out of reach. So anything, extend your arms out and basically cut everything. All the vegetation needs to go, and it will produce a lot of new growth. As for the rind, that's usually, we don't have any products in America that are readily available, but in Brazil, they do dry and grind the rind up, and it's used as a flour or flour additive. So it's kind of starchy, and it's used for that kind of purpose.
Okay, you kind of talked about this, but Edgar wants to know, what about caterpillars?
All right, caterpillars, a good question. There are caterpillar pests. The main one's called a Gulf fritillary. And if you don't pay attention carefully, in some cases, they can really defoliate your plant. I've rarely had that problem, but some people have that problem if the plants aren't really that healthy. They seem to be more attracted to slightly unhealthy plants. But if you want to eliminate all caterpillars, I recommend an organic insecticide called BT. It's simply the letters BT stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. And again, it's certified organic in most cases, and it only affects chewing insects. So a honeybee can come along or a bumblebee, and it can pollinate the flower and will not affect pollinators.
Nice. Rocky says, I planted about 1 acre on berms,
Okay.
but then about half of them died this summer. I believe it's root rot, but I'm a little unsure. Do you have any pictures of what root rot looks like?
I think I do got a couple of pictures, but if you don't mind, Jeff, I'm more than happy to take their kind of commercial emails and whatnot. If they're not in Miami-Dade, then if you are in Miami-Dade, please reach out to Jeff. He is the agent for that area, because unfortunately I can't drive down to the Miami area.
Sure you can.
This is only a 5-hour drive depending on traffic, one way.
Way. Yeah.
But that is a really common occurrence. That's why I really emphasize really well-drained soil is extremely important. But if you do have any questions, send me some pictures or reach out to me at ironhill@ufl.edu, especially if you're interested in commercial production, and particularly if you're outside of Miami-Dade County.
Okay, we're gonna do one more question, and I really want to thank you for your time, Mark. It was
Certainly.
really good presentation, and this should be online on YouTube by the end of the week. So I'll send you the link. Last question is from Alex. Pollination. In Miami, we're forced to use hand pollination. Any techniques to make pollination easier?
Okay, so we actually have brought in a couple of carpenter bees. If you're having like commercial production, we brought in a couple of nukes, and basically these containers for carpenter bees, and those are specialized for pollinating passion fruit. But if you don't have lots of bees and lots of pollinators nearby, you can use a clean, fuzzy cotton glove, okay? Or you can use Velcro to kind of scuff up the cotton glove, and you can wipe from the anthers. You can get a lot of pollen on your fingertips, and just like if just a few seconds, very gently touch the flower where it needs to be pollinated, and that can be done. And you can also use a paintbrush, but that gets really expensive. I recommend gloves or just using your fingers if you're really delicate, but ultimately it's best is to attract pollinators. And there are plants you can attract pollinators with, like a salvia flower or bee balm or other mint kind of flowers are really attractive, like an African blue basil. Wow, that will attract like 50 different kinds of pollinators. I've seen 100 or so bees and pollinators on a single plant. I mean, it was like buzzing, really strong, fragrant kind of a scent. So the African blue basil, which is a sterile basil, is fantastic for attracting a wide range of pollinators, and that'll hopefully get onto your passion fruit as well. I know y'all have a lot of questions, but if you want to ask them, please feel free to send me an email, ironhill@ufl.edu. And if you are interested in commercial production, definitely reach out to Jeff or myself. If you're near Marion County, definitely give me a call or an email, and we can do what we can to help you out.
All right, Mark, thanks again. You did a wonderful job. I really appreciate you giving the hour of your time and everything.
Certainly.
Get ready for this. So have a great rest of your week. And guys, I want to see you next week in the propagation class, and the week after, or the month after that, for the tool presentation. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for coming.
All right. Thank you for the invitation. You have a good evening.
Sure.